I make in time of crisis. So welcome, Brian, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Erin. Very nice words.
Couple quick housekeeping things to run through for our Cornet crowd. This is part of the Crave series. Crave is a tasty power bar snack, but it is also the beautiful new name that we have branded thanks to combined efforts of our Real Advantage and Education committees. Crave stands for Cornet Real Advantage Virtual Education Series. And you can see here we have a lot of upcoming events. There's one this Friday by our Career Strategies and Development Committee that Catherine Sanford and I are looking forward to tomorrow on maximizing LinkedIn. And then a bunch of other really relevant topics through the rest of May that I think will be helpful tools and resources. And the Education and Real Advantage Committee are focusing on providing and creating Crave content on this virtual platform in this current moment of time to make sure that we're continuing to bring good quality learning and engagement opportunities to the Cornet community. And the intent is that we anticipate that we can return to in-person events when the time comes, when it's appropriate to do so. But these Crave events are now currently open to all members right now. Lots of ways to join us. We appreciate help and communication and leveraging our social networks right now more than ever to connect. So please share, tweet, use Instagram and LinkedIn to share out your thoughts on this event. And of course, our sponsors are so critical to us right now. We're appreciative for every single one as we've worked hard to bring these programs to a virtual platform. We can actually now showcase them in a nice way. And as you can also see, Trish Fields, our executive director, has a beautiful scrolling homage. So thank you to our sponsors. You guys make this possible and it's very appreciated. I also want to say a special thank you to Debbie Crooks and Kate Fields. You guys are the ninja guru masters of all things Zoom and just superior project coordination and management skills in making these sessions possible. So thank you for the incredible amount of time and energy that you've put into this. For those of you who've joined us to engage with Brian, because I know you guys don't have enabled audio or video, use your Q&A chat bubble at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on how you've configured your Zoom settings. And I will field and redirect those questions to Brian so that we can make sure that there is engagement with you. And Brian, I'll volunteer you, as I know you would volunteer yourself, but always a good opportunity just to connect one-on-one with Brian after the session if you have questions or further things that you'd love to discuss with him. And Brian, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Erin. Yeah, I appreciate all the words and thoughts on this. You know, when Erin reached out to me a week ago to ask if I'd be interested in helping in some way, you know, the title is interesting. You know, navigating, managing your career during crisis, because I looked up the definition. You know, and the definition is intense times of difficulty, trouble, or danger. And you know, while every crisis is different, I think where we're in now hits on all three. And I think it's, I don't really like the word unprecedented in that I feel it's been overused over the last couple of months. I mean, literally, yes, what we're going through, none of us have ever been through. It's been over 100 years since, you know, this country has dealt with a pandemic and the world. And so we weren't around in 1918, you know, when the last one happened. And, you know, I think it's important to come together and to, you know, to lock arms and, you know, offer support, perspective, guidance. You know, first thing I'm going to say is I am no expert when it comes to pandemics and what we're going through. But, you know, my goal for today is, you know, with the 20 plus people we have, if I can offer any sort of perspective, context, you know, whether it's a concrete actionable item to do with, you know, managing your career in the near and midterm, or provide some hope for those who may need it. That if I can do that for one person, then this you know, hour will be a big success. And so just to, give you some background on who I am, many of the names I'm not familiar with, which is great. Always great to make new connections. And as Erin said, I am more than happy to engage one-on-one in the days and weeks ahead for anyone who may, want to bounce, ideas, questions, seek additional perspective, elaborate on some of the conversation today. So by all means, happy to do so. So who am I? My name is Brian Walsh. I am one of the partners at 50. Actually, can you scroll up a little bit on that last slide? The intro slide. No, other way. Yeah, we'll hold off on those for now.
Okay, sorry, Brian.
No, one more up. That, yeah, right there. So.
Sorry, my mouse got excited.
No, it's okay. So 52X Consulting is a boutique search, HR, career consulting practice. We've been in business since 2011, starting in New York City. We opened our Boston practice a little over 3 years ago. So that's when I came on board. The founder, Ruben Cano, and I, we worked for a large international recruiting firm for a long time ago. And Ruben decided, to branch out on his own 2011, and then reach out to me about 4 years ago to start discussions about expanding to Boston. And then we opened an office in Denver last summer. And so, I think for me personally, I've lived here my whole life. I'm from the area. I grew up in Waltham. I went to BC High, BC. So I've always been in the area. I've never lived more than 10 miles from South Station, which is, I'm proud of that, but it's also a little sad also in a way. But, for me, what I love to do is, it's not about recruiting, in terms of what we do. We really look to connect, engage, have those real, true personal connections with the people that we are partnering with, whether it's a talent community who are, looking for a new opportunity or the companies which we represent. And so right now, what is just so unique is that this is my third recession that I've lived through professionally. I graduated college in 2001. So I started my career as a recruiter in July, 6 weeks before September 11th. And so I was so young, I was a kid, I didn't really know what was going on. Those of you who are older and were living through that, more into your careers will certainly remember that more in detail than I do. But for me, 2008, 2009 was the one that, for me changed a lot of my thought process. It was painful. I was young, I was newly married, and, I was leading a team of 25 people and who were afraid. I was afraid, and I think what I always find interesting too in economic downturn is the industry in which we're all in, right? Design, construction, and those affiliate industries that support design and construction are impacted during economic downturn more than a lot of industries. And especially when it comes to, from a career standpoint, hiring. You see layoffs that happen at a larger clip in this industry than others. Hiring comes to, in many ways, a stop. But what my message and what I've learned in having been through 2 recessions is that we will come out of this, while we don't know. I think that's one of the harder things about right now is that there's just so much unknown. And, what is so different about where we are today is that, 2008, 2009 was a slow buildup. There was a year, 2, 3, 4 years in the background with the banks and all the bad loans. And it was this really slow burn until it finally, exploded, in 2008. But what happened now is, there were signs of slowdown, and we know we were overdue for a recession, but this thing just hit so fast and so comprehensively. And then at least 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we could live our lives. We're not able to do anything close to that right now. And I think there are so many additional emotions that tie into that, and which we'll get to in a minute. But as we segue, what I'd like to do before even starting the conversation, we put together some 3 poll questions. They're anonymous, and encourage you to answer them because I want to take a temperature of the audience on a couple of different areas. So one is, what is your current employment status? So employed, relatively safe; employed but nervous about layoff instability; furloughed, unemployed, or other. Second one is, were you in the workforce during the last recession? And then the last one, and you'll see in a minute, is what are you looking to get out of today's conversation? There are 5 options. We asked you to pick 2. So if you want to take a minute to go through that, answer quickly. Again, all answers are anonymous.
Great. So Brian, while we're waiting for poll data to come back to Kate and Debbie, random question, but maybe near and dear to many that are listening in on the call. What is one of the most successful tactics you have found that you and your wife, Kate, are doing as a work from home parent to deal with your children during this current moment in time? Do you have any tips, tricks, hacks, good advice?
Oh God. Now, the only reason that I'm in silence right now is because Katie took the kids out for a ride. So I have 3 young children. They are 8, 6, and almost 4. So, you know, and that's one of the, again, we'll talk about it a little bit. One of the biggest challenges is for those who have children of any age. You know, I've had friends of mine who have older children, the teenagers who, you know, hate your parents to begin with, and now you're stuck at home with them, you know, all the time. That's provided very unique challenges for, you know, the toddlers and the infants. Yeah, I best man at my wedding, they had their first child 2 weeks ago. So
Wow.
They're living in kind of an ignorant bliss, right? In that they're just focused on the baby. But for those with the school age kids, it's been awful. It's been really hard because my wife works full time at Boston College and is also in a PhD program as a student. And so, you know, it took us a month to get a sort of structure, but like with anything, it was about communication. We weren't figuring out schedules, you know, and so we'd constantly be butting into each other on conference calls, and then you're left with kids who are still pretty damn dependent on you to help navigate. So I think that the biggest thing, communication, and making once the kids are in bed, we look at each other's calendars. What time do you have this? What time do you have that? And trying to, you know, she can do more things at night being in higher education. But I'm limited in that, in what we do. But yeah, communication, structure, patience, which is hard for me. And my boys who are 6 and 8 are constantly fighting with each other. So, you know, and also trying to understand they're going through this in a very unique lens, you know, as well. So I wish I had better answers. I think what I do find a silver lining of solace in is that it feels like every parent I'm talking to is struggling in their own way. So I wish someone had the right answers, but I don't think there are any.
Well, thank you, Brian. We do have a question in the chat while we wait for the poll results, and it's from Bart. And Bart asks, what is the best method connecting with recruiters and hiring managers without applying to specific positions? And your choice, Brian, if you'd like to answer that now, or if you want to address it.
If we can put that kind of in a parking lot, because that's going to be part of what we'll talk about, and I think it'll be more relevant towards the latter half of the conversation. Great question, yeah, Bart, but I think more relevant towards the latter half.
Great. I will keep it in the open chat box and we'll make sure we do answer it. Thank you, Bart.
Thank you.
Bart says thank you. Wonderful. All right, poll results. So, okay, Brian, it looks like the majority of folks here, 33% feel relatively safe, followed by a close second. 27% are, you know, employed but nervous about stability. We have following 20% unemployed, 7% are furloughed, and 13% have identified as other.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to know what that other percent is, maybe business owners or other opportunities. Yeah. And 80%, actually, the question that you asked, 80% were in the workforce during the last recession. So that's the majority of our attendees today who've weathered this. So maybe in and of this call, there's a good support network just of peers that are listening in. Debbie Crooks would like to, Debbie, would you like to answer Bart's question live? No.
Okay. Hi, Erin. Sorry, that was me. I just mentioned that you had already read the question, so
gotcha.
Disregard that.
Nope. Thanks for clarifying. Appreciate that. And then just back to the poll. We'll focus on biggest percent, 67% Boston would like to have a better understanding of the sort of the current landscape, the market economics of, you know, the AEC or CRA fields, followed by 47%, how to leverage all the available resources to get back to work. You know, LinkedIn and resume best practices. And actually for that question, we're having a career strategies and development session on LinkedIn tomorrow. And certainly that's something that we're happy to connect one-on-one to help people. But Brian, you can certainly address it briefly if you'd like to.
Yeah, my plan on that was to speak to it at a high level, knowing that there was a workshop upcoming. And also this would be an opportunity, and I'm happy, you know, don't charge for this. This is happy just part of my follow-up conversations. If anyone ever wants one-on-one advice, critiques, tips, best practices on resume, LinkedIn portfolio, you know, happy to do it, but I'll speak to it at a high level today.
Great. And then very high percent, 47%, you know, how to leverage all available resources to get back to work right now, which dovetails nicely with Bart's question. 13% want to know how to manage uncertainty, fear, and anxiety, which I think is applicable to everyone, certainly. And the question of, is this a good time to consider a move if I am still employed, is a high percentage at 40%. And I have to say, I've seen it very successfully done, having facilitated one just this past week. It's no time like the present. So Brian, if that helps sort of contextualize the audience's needs, and the chat box is open.
Yes, it does. And Stacy Chambers offered to for other, could be, you know, working on a consulting or contract basis, which certainly qualifies, you know, on the other category. So thank you for that, Stacy. And, you know, before going to the next slide, just, you know, looking at that last question about what people are looking for, you know, I put the managing uncertainty, fear, and anxiety. I am not a psychologist, you know, and so I'm not licensed or qualified to, you know, to provide professional, you know, advice, but just more, again, from a general standpoint. It was the lowest, you know, so we can touch on it. But, you know, I assumed the market condition would be the number one, and also not surprised the other three are close, you know, and that's good because we'll be able to address all of it. It was just good to get a feel for where we're at. No surprises. You know, the second question, it's not the actual, although I don't have the exact, someone on this, whether it's a participant or a panelist may know the exact figures of the demographics in the workforce. From my understanding and reading, it's somewhere in the 33 to 40% range. We're not in the workforce 11 years ago, you know, so those who are in grade, high school, middle school, college, but that's fine. It's neither here nor there. You know, I guess that if nothing else, it can be that the vast majority of people on here were in the workforce, do remember 2008, 2009. And, you know, again, everyone's impact was different, right? So as we kind of go through and start the content, you know, really, I wanted to start with what are we dealing with, you know, and there's so many, and this is a certainly not an all-inclusive list. There is probably another dozen bullets that we could go on to that, you know, is going to be unique to each individual. But, you know, whether we're, you know, in design or construction directly, whether we're on the commercial real estate side, or in markets, furniture, you know, supply companies, whatever it might be that support the industry, we're dealing with projects that are being, you know, put on hold, outright canceled. And this speaks to a little bit about the market conditions, which also make this really unique. In that, as I talk to the market, as I talk to, you know, predominantly our client base, it consists of architects and construction managers, general contractors. And so we're literally hearing all over the map. I have one, you know, a handful of clients who have been minimally impacted, you know, whether it's the markets they serve, you know, still housing is still very much going forward in a lot of areas. So depending on where these phases we're at, for the design side, firms that were heavily into design, they're still moving forward in large capacities. Life sciences is, I mean, it was the hottest market, in my opinion, pre-COVID, and I think it will become even stronger as a result. You know, but then your industries like retail, commercial interiors, you know, both on the development and construction side as well as design are, I think, at risk, you know, for sure. We're dealing with salary schedule reduction. You know, people on this today, I would imagine, you know, have had to deal with it, at least if they are employed, maybe having dealt with this. So having to deal with a new financial stress, you know, that we didn't have to deal with 2 months ago. So we saw people here are furloughed. And, as a business owner, we have not, fortunately, knock on wood, had to deal with that furlough or layoff yet. But, for those who aren't business owners, and depending on the company you work for in terms of size, I've learned so much just in the past 3 or 4 weeks, as it pertains to the payroll protection program. And the learning experience has been enormous and not necessarily all that positive. Been a lot of frustration. And so this isn't to scare anyone, but what we're dealing with right now is, if anyone was following, that first $350 billion offering was completely wiped out in the first 3 days a couple of weeks ago. And we are now in the middle of the second wave, and only 2 out of 30, actually less than 2 out of 30 applicants got funding in the first round. And so, this second round, there's more regulations that have been put into play because the big banks were taking up such a big percentage, so that they're limiting what the big banks can do. But what is happening on the second wave is that if people don't get the funding, and what I guess the rules are, if you want the loan forgiven, you can't lay off during an 8 or 10 week period once the funds are received. So I feel like you're going to see a mass layoff after this week or next week, whenever the funds are withdrawn. And then again, this is my only opinion. And then once we hit July, once that period is met, you might see another one. So just mentally, as people prepare, not that everyone, I hope to God I'm wrong, but just to at least prepare for that. Because that's basically the boat that we're in, at this point. But we have reduced salaries for our staff, including the owners, just to be prudent, in what we're doing. And at the very least, there's just so much uncertainty. And that's what also is hard about right now is that we're still in the early stages. Even though it seems like 7 weeks at home, not it feels like an eternity, and it feels like it's never going to end. And so just there's so many logistics that need to be worked out, which is why I think we're seeing this reopening of Boston and Massachusetts as a whole. Never mind, I mean, the numbers still aren't going down in terms of the afflicted, but just hearing all the logistics that have to be put in place for people to safely return to work is immense. Thinking about how are we going to get to work when we are able to go back to work? How often are we going to stay virtual? And then, as I alluded to earlier, how will various industries be impacted as it pertains to design and construction? Like I said earlier, you're going to have markets that either were strong and will get stronger, or ones that will emerge, maybe ones that we're not even thinking of right now. And finally, as we talked about, in terms of parents, I was thinking of asking that as part of the poll question too, just to get an idea. If you are in single, living alone or with a partner, without children, it's a very, very different experience, not better or worse, just very different. But for those, like we were talking about, with that sweet spot of younger school age children, that's providing an even bigger challenge. And for those, who are in the similar boat to Erin and I, that's, there's no, we have to do it. We've got our obligations to our family, but we also can't be superheroes to our children either. We already are, so but I think the standards, I know we're struggling with trying to make sure that the standards are there, but not unrealistic at the same time. So, but you can move on to the next slide. And as we go through, please, by all means, if anyone has questions, just pop them into the Q&A. We can answer them in the moment, or like earlier, put them in more of the parking lot.
Words well spoken, Brian. I think managing expectations, making sure they're realistic, is just sound advice for any moment in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, this goes into the emotional side of what we're dealing with, and how is it making us feel, and then you see here up on screen, there's going to be emotions that aren't here that people are feeling that are unique, to their own situation. I know for me, one of the things that I struggle with is lack of control, that there's and I don't know about anyone else, but my mood is directly tied to the weather these days. Like if it is a not good day weather-wise, and again, it's the parent with young kids that need to get outside, but with the weather not being great, every good weather day, almost there is this bit of a sense of normalcy, especially if it's on the weekend and we can get outside. But it's the lack of control for me, you know, with everything, with being a parent, a partner, a business professional, I struggle there. And that's part of the conversation today is if you are feeling, you know, a lack of control, if you're out of work or you feel like you're nervous, or if you're feeling nervous about being potentially out of work or furloughed. I mean, I think 2/3 of the respondents are either nervous or out of work. And so that's a huge thing that while trying to identify what are things that we can control to help navigate through this. It's not going to solve it. It's not going to cure it. You know, the some of the challenges that exist, but in any it's that fight or flight, you know, instinct in humans. And so if to try to be on the offensive and, you know, in ways in which you can manage, I think will go a long way, you know, and that's just on the career side, you know, and again, I'm not qualified to speak about life and all of that, but I do find the same things as a parent, you know, when I'm feeling out of control of like trying to manage the kids fighting, it can be like, well, what can we can control playtime. We can control, you know, we can get out of the, you know, the craziness of remote learning for an 8-year-old. And, and I have no problem saying, Lean, let's go outside and play catch, you know, for a few minutes, or, you know, reverting back to those, you know, aspects of parenting that we know and love, you know. So, you know, I think the longer we go through this, and, you know, again, no one has a crystal ball. We don't know, you know, when we can start to, and it's going to be a long time before we go back to some sense, and we may never get back to where we were, you know, but the things around the future, right? And what are things going to look like? Some nice timing on the segue. Like, we just don't know. And, you know, it's like, I'm hearing, you hear extremes, and that's why you don't want to read too much. Like, you hear extremes of us, you know, the possibility of going into something that would be worse than the Great Depression and an extended depression multi-year. And now we're seeing reports that we could have a vaccine ready in September, you know, and that's not going to cure everything either, but just from a safety and confidence to get back out there. So again, that's out of our control, right? And so because of that, trying to understand what the market will look like, I'm not going to sit here and predict, you know, but it's shifted already, right? And so for those who are thinking about, right, if you have been furloughed or laid off, if you're in transition, if you're working but you're nervous, we were seeing over the past 3 to 5 years, and I would say this to the firm owners, the principals of my clients that I was working with, it was a candidate market, you know, in a way that I had never seen in 20 years of doing this. And the ability for candidates to be selective, to be able to have leverage when it came to salary negotiations, et cetera. In a down economy, that does go away to a large degree. And so, you know, we have to expect, just from an economic cycle standpoint, everything gets pushed down. You know, architects' fees get pushed down, construction fees get pushed down, our fees get pushed, everything. And so it trickles down. And so from an expectation standpoint, like, for example, we have he calls himself a senior project manager, but he's a construction project manager with 7 years of experience, who was recently laid off from his firm. And he had a base salary of $125,000, and he is, you know, targeting that or more. And we had to have the conversation with him yesterday, like, that's not realistic anymore. That might have been realistic a month ago, but that's not realistic anymore. And that's hard information to share, because you see people, especially if they're younger and have not been through this before, they're struggling to wrap their heads around this. You know, as a job seeker, you know, you will not, in many cases, maybe you will, but in a lot of cases, we're not going to have the luxury to be selective, or as selective as we were. You know, in terms of, like, because I sit with people all the time, and, you know, I ask them, and this goes back to a workshop that Aaron and I did a couple of years ago to try to get people thinking about their careers. I always ask, what's missing, right? You took my meeting, you know, you took time to sit down with me. Well, what's missing in your career, right? And we were able to get to the root and a very emotional response of like, what am I not getting in one way or another, whether it's, in many times compensation's fourth or fifth, it's usually career path or opportunity, challenging, work, et cetera. But so what ends up happening is these candidates paint an ideal, like the perfect job, dream job scenario. And that's many times what they've been able to do over the last few years. That's when I'll move.
Right.
And now, kind of going to one of the poll questions around, if I feel otherwise fairly safe, but I was thinking actively about making a move, is now the right time to do it. Right. And so there's going to be two sides, to your point. I feel like you can. Companies, one thing that I want to assure, especially those who are feeling frustrated or, kind of you're staring up at a mountain, like, when am I going to be able to get back to work? Companies are still looking for top talent. Now, they may logistically not be able to hire someone today for a start date that's determined, but I'm having conversations with the majority of my clients. While our workload has reduced naturally based off of what's going on, there are businesses out there and business owners who are telling me, listen, there is an unprecedented amount of talent that's going to be available. Or, maybe it's not out of work, but open to making a move that otherwise not have. And so they want to be able to capture the top talent, and they will do that. So for those of you, if you are confident in your abilities and confident that you can consider yourself in that top talent echelon, again, I don't want to make any promises, but I'm on a handful of searches now for, important strategic roles, that will go forward. They're not going to move quickly, but they will move forward. And these firms want top talent.
Sure. Brian, there's a good, to interrupt you, a good chat question actually from Gretchen Barron. And she's asking questions around the generational breakdown. She's saying that, more senior staff have already been seeing fewer opportunities for growth as firms are flattening their management. And she wants to know, is this potential moment in time more bad news for Gen X as we move into the second half of our careers? I think a lot of what you said previously applies for that niche.
Yeah.
Sort of
what I will say, and again, this is just being direct and having and experiencing all different attitudes as it pertains to hiring, is that ageism unfortunately exists. It has. I've had to have very challenging conversations with firm owners around that. Some are fantastic and have been, and I think will continue to be fantastic. And as it pertains to, agnostic around age, they want talent. They want, in some cases, yes, they want experience. I think it could, and I'm not trying to ride the fence, Gretchen. I think in some ways it could mean more challenging times, but I think it also, it's thinking about expectations around, the compensation structure. I think what I find often is that, with people that have more than say 25, 30 years of experience, if they're not a principal or owner, I have to have a lot of compensation, coaching conversations, around what is realistic. And it's tricky because, people a lot of times will tie compensation to worth and, self-worth and self-confidence and esteem. And, but what I'm really fascinated to see, and this, Gretchen, will speak to your question, is because we have been forced into creating a virtual remote work environment, what that's going to do and how that's going to impact the workforce. One strategy that we literally had a call today internally about, one of the things that we're looking to potentially pivot in the short term, because my client base, 90% of my clients are within a 15-minute walk of substation. Well, it's for Boston and New York have been two of the hardest hit metro areas in the country. And so hiring in this industry in the traditional sense, it's not going to look the same for quite a while. So for us to stay viable, we are looking at a more national outreach. And what we're looking at is the concept of virtual talent, top talent for markets that otherwise would never have access, right? You think of a top design firm or a top construction firm that now, finding ways to do things virtually you're going to see companies get creative. And then again, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent around commercial real estate, but the future of commercial real estate. And, I'm hearing things around companies are going to need more space to then, have people who have the proper space distance wise, to firms shrinking in space because there's going to be more of a virtual workforce. Both could be true, but I think what that's going to create are going to be opportunities that are not traditional the way we know them, but that could become the norm. And that's that we're literally coming together as a company on Monday to start talking about that, about offering that to firms across the country. And then for the talent community, being able to say, hey, I could potentially be in a consulting role or a virtual role with a company living in Boston, in Atlanta, Dallas, Nashville, you name the other metro. So I wish I had a more direct answer, Gretchen. It's just, it's hard to predict.
There is a certain advantage upside to the boundarylessness that we have right now that brings people together across geographies. That's a good point, Brian. And I would say too, just as a basic best practice at any moment in time, looking at your career, to reinforce what you said, expand your mind a little bit around prioritizing what's important to you and how you would look at opportunities differently that you might not otherwise have looked at. And then also apply, go for it. And, you can perhaps talk to Bart's question down the road about how do you work with, hiring managers or decision makers right now. But I think that if you don't try, you don't give yourself the chance to even have the opportunity. If you look at a job description and think, oh, I can't really do that, you don't know. 9 times out of 10, the job description isn't even really accurate truly about what the job really is. So I would say just create that space in your search to make sure that you don't, don't do yourself the disservice of discounting opportunities without properly exploring them.
Yep. No, well said. And I think the last bullet on the slide, just considering, and it speaks to your point just now, considering roles, company situations that you never would have thought about, before, that could be, whether it's a virtual role that I just talked about, or even a consulting or contract role, that's a part of our business is call it whatever you want, call it consulting, contracting, temping. That last word gets a really bad rap. People, have a lot of the talent community strongly push back, and in a strong market, they have every right to. They have the leverage. The first 13 years of my career, 80% of the business that I did was consulting, contract placement. Whether it was within this umbrella of AEC and commercial real estate, or I spent years outside of it as well. But the last 3 to 5 years, that has been a small supplemental part of what we do because of just the pure economics of supply and demand. There's been no supply of labor. And, we would get very strong pushback, and in many ways, understandably so, from people at all levels saying, I'm not even a nose up, I'm too good for it. It's just, it's not stable. All the connotations that people think of, I'm the first out, or, it's not as stable. I'm not looked at the same way, treated the same way as a full-time employee. But this is from an economic standpoint, just, from my experience in 20 years is that, and in this industry specifically, especially on the design side, is that, for the next X amount of months, when we're in the deepest part of this, that's when you see hiring at a standstill. But eventually, as we come out of this, and just the natural cycle of of a recession starts to, get to its low point, plateau at the bottom, and start to pull out, what happens is companies are going to start to get those projects back, and they're going to start to get work in. And in many cases, they'll have cut deep, or deeper than they wanted to. And all of a sudden it's, oh shoot, I need people. But I don't have the confidence to hire full time. And they certainly don't want to pay our fees to hire full time on top of that. And so what they end up doing is hiring people on a contractual or consulting basis. And it actually, and this isn't selling my service, this is just this is how I've seen this go two separate eras in the last 20 years. And it's a great way, if you're in transition, to try out a company maybe you never would have thought about, or an opportunity role. And that's what comes back first, are these more either temporary in nature or consulting in nature roles, because there's a finite beginning and end or it's open-ended with that. It gives the employer flexibility, and it provides you as the employee an opportunity. You're getting a paycheck. So many times in my career, I've placed people in that consulting arrangement that end up getting hired full-time, after 6, 7, 8 months. So that's just one example. Maybe it's, if you're a designer or an architect, it might be looking at, going to the furniture side, there's going to be, I've been seeing so many, I'm sure you all have as well, from the furniture side of our business, the future of how furniture is going to look, both in, as you think about commercial offices to academic settings to hospitals. So there could be all new opportunities in that respect. I have a client on the broker side who we were talking last night. If your experience on the design or construction side has been more in the commercial corporate interiors or commercial office space, there could be a whole new industry for occupancy planning and workplace strategy as companies figure out a way to exist again, right? So this client last night said they had a pitch yesterday. We are working on 2 active roles that are going to start in the next month with a pharmaceutical company. They had a pitch yesterday. They're going to need 2 to 3 more occupancy planners. And they're really excited because they think this is going to be a whole new kind of niche industry that's going to come out of this. So these are, I see workplace strategy all the time, workplace strategists, I never really knew what that meant, but now I'm getting very immersed in that. So those are just some small examples.
Good. And the consulting sort of 10% of the poll respondents, Brian, were that sort of self-employed or consulting role.
Okay.
So that's important.
Okay. Good. All right, we can go into the last slide here. Good timing. So yeah, as we think about what things will look like, some of these have already been touched. Is this?
Sorry.
No, last slide, sorry.
Stuck. There we go.
Okay.
Is that the right one?
What do we do? Yep. So what do we do about this? I think regardless of your answer earlier about your current employment status, the experts, and I have not done this myself as a supposed alleged expert in this industry. You're supposed to update your resume once a year. Now, if we could show of hands of people who have done that, I'd be surprised if more than a couple actually have. I know before I launched into this, I had gone 8 years without touching a resume. And so if you haven't, and what I would imagine is the majority of people on this webinar, if it's been years since you've touched it, it can be overwhelming. And again, we can dive deeper. Please reach out if you want to have any conversations. I know when I had to do this 6 years ago, for the first time in 8 years, and I do this for a living, I sat at my home laptop and I looked at my computer for 3 days. Like, how the heck am I going to do this? And this is what I do every day. So, and most people in my experience, they struggle with writing a good resume. And so for me, just like you said earlier about the job description, the resume is such a small piece of it's actually 5-10% maybe, but it is important. It's a starting point. So regardless, update that resume. If you haven't already done it, use this time at home with more time, use some commute time to, don't take it all at once. You're not going to run a marathon tomorrow, start with running a mile, work on small chunks at a time. Same thing with your LinkedIn profile, right? So just my quick high level piece, again, it's an opinion. It's not the way. There are many ways to have great looking resumes, great looking LinkedIn profiles. What I would say is, try not to have either be just a work history, right? Place of employment, year X to year Y, and job title. And I see that on so many LinkedIn profiles, and you're selling yourself short, because as someone who is seeking talent on a daily basis, both for my client base, but also internally, if I just see that you worked as X title at ABC company, that I don't know what you did, right? So being able to, if you think of the LinkedIn profile, again, my opinion is having bullets. It doesn't have to be as comprehensive as your resume, but that highlight those top responsibilities, top achievements are going to be important, because it helps separate you from, and there's going to be a lot more competition now for fewer jobs. So to have these aspects of that package, because that's what you look at: a resume, a portfolio if applicable, a project list. Those are all parts of a more comprehensive package, and it's important to have that be it's your only differentiator at the beginning. Making sure that your network is as strong as possible. Again, just like it's a good time to refresh and update your resume, I think it's a good time to refresh that LinkedIn network. If you were to spend an hour or two and go through, whether you have 200 connections or 2,000, how relevant are some of those? Maybe it's a time to remove some connections. And if your connections are on the lower side, what you see is, you can see how many connections someone has, but typically it's 500 plus, right? You can't see exactly unless you know if you're connected to them. You want to be connected to people. I'm not saying minimize the amount of people. You want to maximize the amount of people, but have it be the right people in your network. And so within this industry, even if you don't know someone, reach out, make a connection. Identify who your shared connections are. And you can see that on LinkedIn. Who are you mutually connected to? Either go to that mutual connection. If it's someone that you think could be at a company you'd be wanting to inquire about, go to your mutual connection and say, would you be willing to make an introduction?
I was just going to say for Brian, that's like number one, do the research, find the connections, get a warm intro to that prospective employer. If you're curious to reach out, it's always easier to have a warm welcome than it is to reach out cold.
Yep. Yeah. And we can answer that question now, in Bart, and I take the same approach in developing my business, right? As you think about, if you're suddenly finding yourself not working, and maybe it's been a year, or maybe it's been 15 years since you've had to look for a job, it can be intimidating. And, for those people who are not natural salespeople, cold outreach is very intimidating. And so for me, even though I spent years cold calling in my past life, I use my connections naturally to help build this business. And Aaron's a great example. Aaron's been a huge asset for me in terms of making warm connections with companies that I didn't otherwise have ins with. And it's the same concept if you think about your career search. And so I know for me, I become that warm connection with the companies I represent because I've built that trusting relationship. So if I present a candidate that I am putting my stamp on, 9 times out of 10, they are going to have a conversation with that person. And so whether it's identifying a recruiter or trying to make connections with employers directly, try to have with a recruiter, and this has nothing to do with my business, it's try to identify someone that you connect with, that you trust, that you can build that genuine relationship with. A lot of recruiters out there are transactional, right? They work for companies that are driving numbers. And that's the world I grew up in, which works in certain industries. I feel it's why I broke off, because it wasn't working in more niche type of fields. It's really, there is a human element. And so identify, and there are very respectable recruiting outfits out there, in addition to what we do, that they will be an advocate for you. And in this market, again, top talent, the recruiters are going to be the ones that drive that top talent to the top. Companies can think, oh, I don't need to use a recruiter because I can find all this talent on my own. In some ways you can, but there are going to be plenty of cases where it's still going to be important to use a recruiter. But back to your connections, use them, take advantage of them. Like I say here, this isn't to you, Bart, so this isn't about you personally, just anyone. Put aside ego, put aside pride. If you're in a position of need right now from a job standpoint, get out of your comfort zone, ask for help. I know for me, if anyone I know has been impacted, Aaron, I know you're the same, all you want to do is help, right? And so you'll be, I think, very pleasantly uplifted with how much warm response you'll get from people.
And find a sounding board too. Brian is often a sounding board for me, as I am for my colleagues in peer network. And this is applicable across the board for your resume upgrade, your LinkedIn refresh, your personal statement that should be consistent across your resume and your LinkedIn statement, and how you think of yourself. I think one of the biggest things we fail to do as professionals is understand our own worth. And sometimes it is far easier to go through this process when you engage a partner, a peer, a friend, a colleague. Use our core network, career strategies and development, and have someone look at your resume, because, I've done this recently with a colleague and she's like, well, I don't have any skills and I'm like, no, you are an eloquent speaker. You find the core key value proposition amidst a giant pile of weeds. You have an ability to distill down responsive action, big picture thinker, but detail implementer. And she's like, I'm like, I work with you. I see you doing these things and you don't even know that you're doing them. So you guys need to take advantage of your cheer squad around you. especially at a time like this, because we all could use a hug and a pat on the back. And so leveraging your peer network to help you see yourself in the way that others see you, I think is really important right now. Don't discount that. Don't sell yourself short.
Mm-hmm. Nope, agreed. So, the last one was just to Erin's point, try to use the outside resources, attending webinars free or ideally free, but even if you have to pay for them, you never know when you might, flip over a rock that's going to lead to something really productive. So I think, we have a few more minutes, and I think if there are additional questions that people have been waiting on, would love to be able to respond in our last few minutes together.
Yeah, nothing in here really, Brian, other than Bart and Gretchen, which I think you answered. We can see others coming in. I will share just one quick thing. I've had chats with colleagues about it all week long. Catherine and I spoke about it actually this morning, and it's the sort of bucket list of what's okay, I guess, right now that you sort of started to speak about, Brian, at the beginning of this is, it's okay if you have a bad day and the weather's bad. It's okay if the next day is a good day. It's okay if, like, I've had to come to terms with this. I think the biggest success maybe I've had today is coming to terms with the current reality is, I'm normally up at 5, dressing 2 children, feeding 2 children, driving 2 children in 2 different places, and then boarding a train for an hour and getting to the office. And I've lived 4 hours by the time I get into the office. Now, it's really hard and I'm sleeping until 6:30. Heaven forbid I'm sleeping late. But you know what? It's okay. I don't have the commute. I'm exhausted. I need to sleep an hour. And so I don't need to create extra anxiety for myself by feeling guilty about new behaviors that are in fact okay. So that's just my soapbox note to everyone, is that it's okay. Sleep late, drink a glass of wine, do what you need to do. We do have another question. And Bart says that he would love the opportunity for a one-on-one, so we can make sure that you guys connect.
Excellent. Looking forward to it, Bart.
And I think that goes for anyone else on this call. But yeah, I would just, I would encourage each one of you to accept and to be okay with whatever behavior or habit is now happening, and know that if you need to sleep, you need to sleep. If you need to take a walk, if you need to be angry for a minute, if you need to be sad, that's okay, because you'll feel differently in another hour or in another day.
Excellent.
So, Brian, 5 minutes left. Any other questions or parting words of wisdom for folks as we continue to figure this out?
No, I mean, you very well said the last bit, and no, I appreciate the opportunity to share. And as we were doing some planning activities for those who are on the call, if more layoffs happen, and again, I'm predicting they will, there could be opportunity to have other sessions like this. And so as your network of individuals, if any of the other people have communication, on any future workshops like this. So just keep an eye out for that, because I'm happy to continue this as we go through this. Absolutely. And Bart is offering you his thanks for putting it together. Lisa Desjardins has also expressed interest in a one-on-one with you. So we will make sure, let me scroll back up to the top. And I believe, Brian, that we did not include your email. I'm sorry, I should have included your email here, but we can make sure that for these participants that we make sure that they can connect with you. Great.
I'll reach out and give them the email for you guys. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Debbie. Well, this has been great. I hope that it's been a balance of humanity, reality, and, dealing with the unknown. And Brian, thank you for jumping in for those on board. Brian was just asked to do this at the end of last week, and he jumped right in and gave his time and coordinated with his family and pivoted nimbly to do this, to have this conversation. So Brian, thank you so much for doing this. Of course, no problem. Thank you. Great. Well, everyone stay healthy, stay safe, be well, and remember, it's okay wherever you are. Yep. The community is here. We've got your back. All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone. Take care.